The dog was growling at the baby every night. What the parents discovered was chilly. In the small Greenwood household, the night seemed increasingly long and unsettling. Thor, a 5-year-old German shepherd, used to embody tranquility. But something changed since the arrival of little Peter. What was once a home filled with joy and serenity transformed into a scene of mystery and apprehension as the shadows of night settled in. Mary and John, the young parents, watched with growing concern as their faithful companion exhibited enigmatic behavior. Thor, who always showed so much affection for the baby during the day, completely transformed after sunset. His eyes, once gentle, fixed intensely on the crib, while deep growls echoed through the silent hallway. The couple tried to stay calm, but the nights became increasingly tense. The clock always struck 3 in the morning when Thor began his inexplicable ritual. His fur bristled, and his gaze remained fixed on Peter's crib, creating a dense and suffocating atmosphere. What no one knew was that those nightly growls concealed a secret that would forever change the family's understanding of true protection. Mary and John's dream had always been to build a warm home where they could raise their children with love and safety. Peter's arrival 3 months ago seemed to have fulfilled this desire, especially with Thor taking on the role of a dedicated guardian of the baby during the day. The dog used to lie close to the crib, wagging his tail whenever the little one moved or made a sound. However, the peace they so desired began to unravel when Thor started displaying disturbing behavior during the early mornings. What was once a serene and protected environment turned into a scene of anguish and mystery. The couple desperately longed for answers, trying to understand what could be affecting their loyal companion so drastically. Nights became a constant test of endurance. Mary, who had always dreamed of peaceful motherhood, now faced growing fear each time the sun set. John, on the other hand, struggled to maintain his rationality, torn between trusting Thor's protective instincts and fearing some unknown threat to his child. The desire for family harmony clashed sharply with the nightly reality that had set in. Between worried glances and whispered conversations, the couple sought a logical explanation for the inexplicable situation. Thor's behavior pushed them further into unknown territory, where the line between protection and threat became increasingly blurred. Their search for answers began to consume their thoughts, turning their dreamed-of home into a place of unease and mystery. The couple's routine took a dramatic turn when Thor's growls began to echo down the hallway every night precisely at 3 in the morning. What was once a peaceful home transformed into a scene of tension and mystery. The German shepherd, always so docile during the day, adopted a completely different posture at night, his eyes fixed on Peter's crib with an intensity that sent shivers down their spines. Mary began to experience increasing anxiety as the sun set. Her nerves, already frayed from sleep deprivation, became even more sensitive to each of Thor's growls. John, meanwhile, tried to keep his composure, but his rational mind couldn't explain the dog's behavior. The couple started taking turns watching over the baby's room, fearing that something might happen during those dark hours. Nights became a constant psychological battleground. The sound of growls mixed with the creaking of the wooden floor and the whisper of the wind through the windows, creating a disturbing symphony that echoed through the house. The air seemed denser during these hours, as if an invisible presence hovered over them, watching every movement. The couple's mental health began to deteriorate rapidly. Mary woke up startled even when Thor wasn't growling, her subconscious programmed to expect the worst. John began having recurring nightmares where threatening shadows approached Peter's crib, while Thor tried to warn them in vain. Thor's behavior became even more enigmatic as he began alternating between threatening growls and anguished whines, as if trying to communicate something beyond human comprehension. On some nights, he positioned himself protectively between the crib and the window, his muscles tense and fur bristling, as if facing an invisible enemy. The tension peaked when Mary began to notice that during Thor's nightly episodes, Peter remained strangely calm, his large, attentive eyes fixed on a specific point in the room that seemed empty to the adults. The room's temperature fluctuated inexplicably, dropping drastically during the most intense growling moments. Shadows on the walls seemed to take on a life of their own during these dark hours, dancing in a disturbing manner under the dim glow of the lamp. The couple began to question their own sanity, torn between the need to protect their child and the fear of the unknown that seemed to have invaded their lives. The mystery surrounding the nights in the Greenwood household began to affect every aspect of their lives. During the day, they lived in a constant state of alert, dreading the arrival of night and what it might bring. Physical and emotional exhaustion began to take its toll, turning the dream of a perfect family life into an apparently endless nightmare. In the frigid early morning, the silence of the Greenwood house was abruptly broken by a deep and anguished bark from Thor. The sound, different from any previous growl, pierced Mary's ears like an arrow of pure despair. Instantly, she jumped out of bed, her heart racing in a frantic cadence. Her bare feet touched the wooden floor, producing a creak almost as intense as the silent alarm her maternal intuition had triggered. John was already standing, his muscles taut like ropes ready to snap. His eyes, half closed from interrupted sleep, alternated between Thor and Peter's crib. The dog remained on alert, his bristled fur creating an almost ghostly silhouette in the dark room. "What's happening?" Mary murmured, her trembling voice mixing fear and determination. Thor kept his gaze fixed on a specific point in the room, as if staring at something invisible to the human eye. Peter remained surprisingly calm, his big, curious eyes watching the environment, with a serenity that completely contrasted the palpable tension. It seemed the baby felt no fear, as if he were accustomed to the strange energy that hovered in the room. John approached slowly, his movements calculated, trying not to provoke any additional reaction from Thor. The dog, usually docile and predictable, had transformed into an implacable sentinel, ready to defend the territory. "We need to understand what's happening," John said, his voice low and controlled. Mary nodded silently, her eyes still fixed on Thor. The German shepherd remained motionless, only his subtly contracted muscles revealing his absolute vigilance. Something was different that night. It wasn't just the usual growls, but an almost palpable urgency filling the room. The temperature seemed to have dropped a few degrees. An inexplicable breeze made the curtains move gently, creating dancing shadows on the walls. Peter continued to remain calm, his big eyes watching something his parents couldn't see. Mary felt a chill run down her spine. Something was about to happen. Thor wouldn't be so intense without a reason. The dog, always so protective, seemed to be warning of an imminent danger beyond human comprehension. "Let's investigate," John whispered, breaking the dense silence. Mary nodded, feeling their lives about to be transformed by the revelation that awaited them. Thor remained motionless, a silent guardian of a secret that would soon be unveiled. During a tense and expectation-filled conversation, John delved into his childhood memories. The stories he heard from his grandmother about supernatural events seemed to resurface at that moment, bringing back memories of mysterious accounts involving children and invisible presences. His words evoked a deep recollection in Mary. Her father-in-law, Peter's grandfather, used to tell old stories about protective spirits that manifested near newborns. At that instant, those narratives once considered mere folklore took on an entirely different dimension. The legend told by the grandfather spoke of spiritual entities that approached families to protect children from negative energies. According to oral tradition, these spirits chose earthly guardians, often animals, to establish a supernatural protection connection. Thor, who until then remained close to the crib with an intense gaze, seemed to silently confirm those stories. His subtle movements and vigilant posture suggested something beyond common human understanding. Mary felt a chill run down her spine. Her father-in-law's stories, once seen as simple folkloric narratives, now carried a revealing urgency. Thor's nightly growls could mean much more than just instinctive behavior of a protective dog. John watched his wife's reaction intently, his eyes conveying a mixture of expectation and fear. The rationality that always characterized him began to give way to a broader, more mysterious understanding of the events. The whispers of family tradition intertwined with the reality they were experiencing at that moment. Peter continued to lie calm in his crib, oblivious to the tension surrounding his parents, as if he already knew the secrets that were about to be revealed. The room's atmosphere transformed. External sounds seemed more distant, and a special energy filled every corner. Thor continued his vigil, now no longer just a dog, but a protective entity with a clearly defined mission. Mary and John exchanged a meaningful look. They realized they needed to delve deeper into those stories. investigate the details of that family legend to fully understand what Thor was trying to communicate each night. The mystery surrounding the dog's behavior gained new layers of meaning. An important revelation was about to completely transform the family's understanding of protection, love, and connections that transcend the material world. With growing concern, Mary and John decided to seek professional guidance to understand Thor's behavior. The situation led them to contact an animal behavior specialist, who agreed to visit their home and investigate what could be causing such agitation in the dog. The behavioral veterinarian, Dr. Ryan, a middle-aged man with an experienced look and investigative calmness, arrived the next afternoon. His skilled hands gently petted Thor, observing every reaction of the animal. The dog, usually sociable, remained tense, his muscles slightly contracted, demonstrating constant vigilance. During the evaluation, Thor kept his eyes fixed on Peter's crib, alternating between moments of apparent calm and sudden signs of agitation. The specialist asked several questions about the family's routine, the animal's history, and any recent traumatic events. Mary and John shared every detail, meticulously describing the nightly growls, Thor's fixation on the baby's room, and the inexplicable feeling that something supernatural might be happening. Dr. Ryan listened attentively, his expression shifting between professionalism and growing curiosity. Physical exams on Thor revealed no organic changes that could explain his behavior. There were no signs of disease, injuries, or hormonal imbalances. However, the veterinarian did not rule out the possibility of a behavioral response to stimuli imperceptible to humans. Animals have much sharper senses than ours, the specialist explained. They can perceive sound frequencies, vibrations, and even energies that completely escape our perception. His words brought a mixture of relief and unease to the couple. The conversation extended for hours, with Dr. Ryan suggesting some strategies to minimize Thor's stress. He recommended behavioral training sessions, relaxation exercises, and a deeper evaluation with an animal behavior specialist. As they discussed, Thor remained close to Peter's crib, his attentive and vigilant gaze. The baby, oblivious to all the tension, occasionally smiled as if he were completely secure. This dynamic intrigued Mary and John even more, who felt there was something beyond comprehensible in that relationship. By the end of the visit, no definitive explanation was found. The mystery surrounding Thor's behavior continued, fueling the couple's anguish and curiosity. The only certainty they had was that the dog seemed to be protecting Peter from something they still couldn't understand. Night approached, bringing with it the expectation of another inexplicable episode. Mary and John prepared themselves, hoping the coming hours would shed some light on the enigma involving Thor, Peter, and the strange nightly occurrences. In the small rural community where the Greenwoods lived, neighbors Clara and Robert didn't take long to notice the unusual atmosphere surrounding the family. Their houses, separated by a narrow dirt path, allowed a closeness that went beyond simple neighborhood relations. Clara, a woman with a sensitive gaze and keen intuition, was the first to notice something different. During an informal conversation, in the backyard while hanging clothes on the clothesline, she shared her own strange experiences with Mary. She whispered about nights when inexplicable sounds echoed across her property, moments when her own animals seemed to react to invisible presences. Robert, more skeptical, initially ridiculed his wife's reports. However, in recent months, he himself began to experience peculiar sensations. His horse, usually docile, became restless during early mornings, neighing without apparent reason and staring fixedly into the dark horizon. The surrounding farmland seemed to hold ancestral secrets. The old wooden fences, whispering cornfields, and dilapidated barns carried untold stories. The neighbors knew local legends about supernatural presences that protected children from invisible dangers. During a shared dinner, Robert and Clara decided to reveal to Mary and John stories that had circulated for generations in the area. They spoke about cases of animals exhibiting prophetic behaviors, defending families from threats imperceptible to human eyes. The neighbors' narrative introduced a new element to the mystery surrounding Thor. It wasn't just an isolated case, but something that seemed to resonate with local traditions. The stories were passed down from generation to generation, creating a mystical fabric that intertwined the community's experiences. Clara mentioned an old local tradition about invisible guardians, spirits that manifested through animals to protect families from supernatural evils. Her eyes shone with a mixture of respect and fear as she narrated these stories, causing Mary and John to exchange glances filled with expectation. The neighbors became involuntary confidants, silent witnesses to a mystery that transcended common understanding. Their own experiences validated what Mary and John were going through, creating a support and camaraderie network that went beyond simple neighborhood ties. The rural community, with its ancestral secrets and deep connections to the supernatural, became an additional character in the plot. The whispers of the fields, the creaking of old fences, and the distant howling of dogs seemed to conspire to reveal a greater secret, waiting for the right moment to be unveiled. Mary and John's emotional dilemmas grew increasingly complex as days passed. The invisible tension surrounding their relationship and family dynamics seemed to drain their last energies, turning love and companionship into a minefield of doubts and unease. Mary felt her internal world slowly falling apart. Motherhood, which she had always dreamed of as a period of fulfillment and joy, was turning into a journey of constant anguish. Her gaze, once serene, now carried a mixture of exhaustion and fear. With each of Thor's growls, her mind spiraled in a whirlwind of terrifying possibilities. During the day, she tried to rationalize the situation. She talked with John, seeking logical explanations for the dog's behavior. However, at night, when silence took over the house and Thor began his vigil ritual, all rational arguments dissipated, giving way to visceral terror. John, in turn, struggled to maintain his composure. His pragmatic nature clashed constantly with the inexplicable moments they were experiencing. As a man accustomed to solving problems, he felt utterly powerless in the face of the situation. The inability to protect his family consumed him internally, generating a silent guilt that eroded his self-confidence. The couple began to experience an almost imperceptible emotional distancing. Conversations, once fluid and affectionate, turned into short, intense dialogues. The concern for Peter and Thor's behavior created an invisible barrier between them, preventing them from finding comfort in each other. Nights became a psychological battleground. Thor, motionless and attentive, represented a walking enigma. His growls were no longer just sounds but coded messages that Mary and John couldn't decipher. The dog seemed to carry ancient knowledge, a connection to something beyond human understanding. Peter, indifferent to all the tension, remained the center of that fragmented universe. His innocent smile starkly contrasted with the charged atmosphere surrounding him. It was as if the baby was protected by an invisible bubble, immune to the fears and anxieties consuming his parents. Each dawn, Mary and John renewed their hope of finding an explanation. They would consult more specialists, delve into research, and do whatever was necessary to comprehend the mystery. But deep down, they knew the answer wouldn't come from rationality, but from something much deeper and inexplicable. Love for their family kept them together, even when everything seemed to want to tear them apart. The strength of that bond prevented them from succumbing to fear, turning their fragility into silent and determined courage. They were willing to face any shadow, any mystery that threatened the peace of their home. Thor continued his relentless vigil, guardian of a secret that was soon to be revealed. His eyes, sometimes gentle, sometimes threatening, seemed to hold the key to a mystery that surpassed the limits of human comprehension. The escalating tension in the Greenwood residence reached unsustainable levels. Thor's behavior transformed the domestic environment into a minefield of emotions and uncertainties. Each night became an unrelenting challenge for Mary and John, who saw their inner peace progressively eroded by the mystery surrounding the dog and baby Peter. Emotional strain began to take its toll. Mary lost sleepless nights, her trembling body and constantly alert gaze. Her nerves, once as solid as rock, now seemed like fragile cotton threads about to snap at any moment. John fought to maintain his rationality, but his face betrayed the growing fatigue of trying to find logical explanations for the inexplicable situation. Thor continued his nightly vigil ritual, transforming from a docile companion into an implacable sentinel. His growls, once occasional, became more frequent and intense. His bristled fur and constantly tense muscles revealed a defensive energy that transcended human understanding. The family routine rapidly fell apart. Meals became silent moments, punctuated by worried glances and halting conversations. The couple communicated more through gestures and expressions than words, as if fear had suffocated their ability to dialogue. Peter, curiously, remained immune to all the tension. His large, curious eyes watched the environment with disconcerting serenity. It seemed completely oblivious to the emotional whirlwind surrounding him, as if he possessed an understanding beyond his tender age. Nights turned into a psychological battle. Thor positioned himself strategically near the crib, his heightened senses detecting something invisible to Mary and John. The room's temperature fluctuated inexplicably, creating an atmosphere charged with indescribable energy. The couple tried strategies to alleviate the situation. They consulted specialists, conducted veterinary exams, and sought scientific explanations. But each attempt to understand stumbled upon Thor's obstinate behavior and Peter's strange tranquility. Exhaustion slowly consumed them. Mary began to show signs of burnout, her hollow eyes betraying sleepless nights. John struggled against skepticism and fear, torn between his traditional rationality and the growing feeling that something supernatural surrounded them. The neighbors began to notice the change. Whispered comments, sidelong glances, a growing curiosity mixed with concern. The Greenwoods house had become an epicenter of mystery, attracting speculations and rumors. The residence's energy seemed pulsating, pregnant with a secret about to be revealed. Thor continued his relentless vigil, guardian of an enigma that defied all human understanding. Mary and John knew they were on the brink of a discovery that would forever change their lives. On the darkest night they had ever experienced, Mary felt an inexplicable urge to search the house's old rooms. Her cautious steps led her to a forgotten corner where a dusty chest seemed to have been waiting for her for decades. With trembling hands, she opened the lid and found a time-yellowed diary. The fragile pages contained a narrative that seemed to transcend the boundaries of reality. Written in delicate and almost illegible handwriting, the notes revealed an ancient family legend about protective spirits manifesting when newborn children were in imminent danger. The diary belonged to Peter's great-grandfather, a man known for his mystical stories and connections with the supernatural. Each page revealed fragments of an oral tradition that had been forgotten by the family in recent generations. There, it was recorded an ancestral knowledge about a protective energy that manifested through animals, especially dogs. As Mary read, her breathing became increasingly labored. The accounts described situations similar to what they were experiencing. Dogs growling at the void, warning against invisible presences that posed threats to children. The narrative spoke of a kind of spiritual guardian who connected with animals to protect the most vulnerable. The notes mentioned that this protective energy was not something to be feared, but to be understood. They were manifestations of an ancestral force that transcended common human understanding, an intelligence that communicated through subtle signs and seemingly inexplicable behaviors. Thor was not reacting without reason. The dog was, in fact, a channel of this protective energy, a mediator between the physical world and a dimension that few could perceive. His growls were not threats, but alerts. He was protecting Peter from something human eyes couldn't see. The revelation sent a mix of chills and understanding through Mary. Silent tears streamed down her face as she realized that Thor's behavior was not a mystery, but a manifestation of a love and protection that went far beyond what she could imagine. In that moment, the diary in her hands was not just a document, but a bridge between the known and the unknown, revealing a family secret that would forever change the family's perception of protection, love, and the invisible bonds that connect us. Determined to uncover the connection between Thor and the mysterious nightly events, Mary and John prepared for a decisive night. The tension was palpable in the small room, where every shadow seemed to hold a secret. Every silence carried a promise of revelation. John carefully adjusted the bedside lamp, creating an environment that allowed them to observe Thor's every move. The dog, motionless near Peter's crib, seemed like a living statue, his muscles slightly tense, eyes fixed on an invisible point in the room. Mary discreetly organized some objects that could help them during the vigil: a notebook, a flashlight, and the recently discovered great-grandfather's diary. Her movements were calculated, but her breathing betrayed her inner anxiety. Every second seemed to drag on with agonizing slowness. "Tonight we're going to find the truth," John whispered, his hand gently intertwined with Mary's. The couple's companionship was evident, united by the desire to understand Thor's inexplicable behavior. Peter slept soundly, oblivious to the tension surrounding him. His small rhythmic movements created a surprising contrast with the room's charged atmosphere. Thor remained still, but his eyes continued to scan vigilantly, alternating between the baby and invisible points in the room. The night advanced slowly. External sounds seemed completely silenced, as if the outside world had been suspended only in that small space. The clock ticking marked each second with an almost disturbing precision. Mary mentally flipped through the diary's pages, recalling the old stories about protective spirits. Every word seemed to come alive in that moment, transforming the old narrative into something vivid and pulsating. John, meanwhile, remained vigilant, his senses fully alert. Thor began to show the first signs of agitation. His muscles subtly tensed. The hair on the back of his neck slightly bristled. A low growl, almost imperceptible, escaped his throat, a sound that was more a warning than a threat. Peter moved slightly in the crib, his big, curious eyes opening for a moment. Unlike what would be expected from a baby, there was no fear in his gaze. There was something more, a silent understanding that went beyond his age. The couple exchanged a look filled with expectation. They knew they were about to cross a barrier between the known and the unknown. Thor continued his relentless vigil, a silent guardian of a secret that was soon to be revealed. The night promised to be the longest and most transformative of their lives. Every breath, every shadow, every movement seemed to carry the weight of an imminent revelation that would forever change the family's understanding of protection, love, and the invisible bonds that connect us. In the decisive night, Peter's room transformed into a scene of absolute tension and mystery. Thor, the German shepherd, remained motionless near the crib, his muscles tense like ropes about to snap, eyes fixed on an invisible point beyond human perception. Mary and John watched every movement of the dog, their breath synchronized with anticipation. The silence was so dense it seemed to weigh down every object in the room. Precisely at 3 a.m, a different energy began to fill the space, something between the physical and the spiritual, almost palpable. Thor initiated a low growl, a sound that was not threatening but alerting. His fur subtly bristled, creating a protective halo around the crib. Peter surprisingly remained calm, his large, curious eyes contemplating something his parents couldn't see. Suddenly, an inexplicable thermal variation took over the room. The air became denser, almost viscous. John felt a chill run down his spine as Mary involuntarily held her breath. Thor increased the intensity of his growling, transforming it into a sound that mixed warning and protection. An undefined shadow began to dance on the walls, moving unnaturally, almost fluidly. It wasn't an ordinary shadow cast by light, but something that seemed to have its own life. Thor positioned himself completely in front of the crib, creating a physical and energetic shield. In that precise moment, Mary understood. Her great-grandfather's diary came alive in her memories. Thor was not just a dog, but a channel of an ancestral protective energy. His growls were not of fear, but a communication beyond human comprehension. The shadow began to dissipate, as if neutralized by Thor's absolute presence. The dog gradually relaxed his posture, returning to his initial position near the crib. Peter continued to sleep, completely tranquil. John and Mary exchanged a look filled with mutual understanding. Something extraordinary had happened, a protection that transcended the physical world's limits, a love so deep it manifested through Thor's instinct. The mystery wasn't entirely resolved, but one thing was certain. That dog was much more than a pet. He was a guardian, a protector who had chosen Peter as his most sacred commitment. The night returned to its usual quiet, but something had definitively changed. Thor, with his silent vigil, had revealed an ancestral protection secret that would forever transform the family's understanding of love and connection. The next morning, the following dawn, Peter's room transformed into a scene of surprising peace. Thor, the German shepherd who had caused so much fear in recent nights, now rested quietly beside the crib, his body relaxed and eyes showing an almost protective serenity. Mary and John watched the scene with a mixture of relief and perplexity. The dog's behavior had completely changed, as if a heavy energy had dissipated overnight. Peter slept soundly, his gentle movements contrasting with the tension of previous early mornings. The room's atmosphere seemed different. Shadows that once appeared menacing were now just ordinary light projections of the morning glow. Thor occasionally lifted his head, giving the room a quick scan, but without the previous unrest. The behavioral veterinarian, Dr. Ryan, who had visited the family the night before, would be informed of this radical transformation. His theories about animals' heightened senses seemed to gain an even more mysterious dimension in light of these events. Mary found the old great-grandfather's diary on the bedside table, its yellowed pages seeming to hold secrets that were just beginning to be revealed. The family legend about protective spirits took on new contours, transforming from a simple narrative into a visceral and inexplicable experience. John approached Thor, extending his hand to pet the dog's fur. The animal received the gesture docilely, without any sign of the aggression that had characterized him in recent nights. His eyes, once fixed and tense, now showed a protective tranquility. Peter began to move in his crib, letting out some typical baby babbles. Thor immediately adjusted his position, remaining close but without the previous tension. It was as if a silent understanding had been established between the dog and the child. The family had undergone an experience that defied all logical understanding. The nightly growls, once a source of terror, revealed themselves to be an inexplicable protection mechanism. Thor was not just a dog, but a guardian with a connection beyond common human understanding. That morning, the Greenwood house breathed an air of revealed mystery. The walls seemed to guard the secret of a transformative night, where something beyond tangible reality had manifested. Thor was now seen not as a source of fear, but as a silent protector. Peter continued to sleep, completely oblivious to the extraordinary event that had transpired. For the baby, it was just another peaceful morning, protected by his family's unconditional love and Thor's inexplicable guardian instinct. The revelation of that night would forever change Mary and John's understanding of protection, love, and the invisible bonds that connect us. Thor was not just a pet, but a guardian chosen by his family with a dedication that transcended rational explanations. Transformation and legacy. The transformation of the environment and characters unfolded like a dawn of unexpected revelations. The Greenwood house breathed renewed peace, entirely different from the gloomy atmosphere that had dominated the past weeks. Thor, the German shepherd who had previously caused fear and anxiety, now rested serenely beside Peter's crib, his presence conveying silent and profound protection. The room, once a territory of mystery and tension, had become a sanctuary of tranquility. Shadows that once danced menacingly on the walls seemed to have been dispelled by the light of deeper understanding. Thor remained vigilant, but without the anguish that had previously characterized him, his eyes alternating between Peter and the room with an almost sacred calmness. Mary and John watched the scene with a mixture of relief and reverence. The nights of terror had given way to an understanding that transcended common logic. The great-grandfather's diary, discovered at crucial moments, was no longer just a dusty document but a living testament to a family tradition of spiritual protection. The transformation was not limited to the physical environment. Each family member seemed to have been touched by a renewing energy. Peter continued his peaceful sleep, completely oblivious to the extraordinary event that had occurred. For the baby, it was just another morning of safety and comfort. Thor had revealed himself to be much more than a mere pet. He was a guardian, a channel of a protective energy that went beyond human comprehension. His nightly growls, once interpreted as threats, were now understood as a sublime communication of protection. The Greenwood family had undergone an experience that would forever alter their perception of love, protection, and the invisible bonds that connect us. The mystery surrounding them was not entirely unraveled, but one certainty had been established. There is a force that protects the most vulnerable, often manifesting in ways that challenge our limited understanding. The sounds of the house had changed. The creaking floor, once laden with tension, now seemed to murmur stories of protection. Thor occasionally raised his head, giving the room a quick scan, no longer with the restlessness of previous days, but with serene and confident vigilance. The family legend about protective spirits, once an abstract narrative, had transformed into a visceral and deeply personal experience. Mary felt that the great-grandfather's diary was no longer just a document, but a record of an ancestral connection that now pulsed alive in her own family. John approached Thor, extending his hand in a gesture of recognition and gratitude. The dog received the pet with docility that completely contrasted his posture from the previous nights. His eyes, once fixed and tense, now conveyed a peace that seemed to emanate from a deeper understanding. The Greenwood house had transformed. It was no longer just a home, but a sanctuary of love, protection, and subtle mysteries. Thor, Peter, Mary, and John had been united by an experience that had forever changed them, revealing that there are forms of protection that go far beyond what the eyes can see or reason can explain. Conclusion. The extraordinary episode involving Thor, Peter, and the Greenwood family transcended any rational explanation. What had once seemed a terrifying mystery revealed itself as a profound manifestation of love and protection, a connection that surpassed the limits of the understandable. In the following weeks, the family experienced a silent transformation. Thor continued his role as a guardian, but now without the agonizing tension that had marked the initial nights. His gazes toward Peter no longer provoked fear, but conveyed an almost sacred peace, as if an ancestral pact had been sealed. The great-grandfather's diary, once just a dusty object, became a living testament to a family tradition of spiritual protection. Each page seemed to breathe stories of invisible connections, revealing that the inexplicable should not always be feared. It sometimes just needs to be understood. Mary and John realized that the experience had profoundly transformed them. They were no longer the same frightened parents from the first nights. They had learned to trust forms of protection that transcended common logic, to believe in bonds that go far beyond the physical. Peter grew healthy and happy, completely oblivious to the extraordinary event that had surrounded him. For the baby, Thor was simply his protector, his closest companion. The child's innocence starkly contrasted with the depth of the mystery that enveloped them. The final revelation was simple yet powerful. There are forms of love and protection that cannot be explained, only felt. Thor was not just a dog, but a channel of an ancestral protective energy, a guardian chosen to defend the most vulnerable. For the Greenwoods, the story became a silent call for other families to watch for the subtle signs that life occasionally presents. An invitation to look beyond the obvious, to understand that not everything can be explained by reason. The mystery of the nightly growls had dissipated, leaving behind a profound lesson. True love knows no bounds, not even those that separate the physical world from the spiritual. Thor had proven that protection can manifest in the most unexpected forms, as long as we are open to perceiving it. The family silently invited all who knew their story to reflect on the invisible connections that surround us, to pay attention to the signs, the instincts, to that which goes beyond the understandable. Because sometimes the greatest act of love can come from where we least expect it. And so, in the small Greenwood home, Thor continued his silent vigil, guardian of a secret that would forever transform the family's understanding of protection, love, and the inexplicable bonds that connect us.